The sterile white corridors of Epsilon 9 hummed with the constant buzz of regulated atmosphere and suppressed human emotions. Rows upon rows of engineered companions waited, their bodies perfect, their spirits contained within carefully constructed genetic boundaries. Among them, Arya stood out not for her physical perfection, but for the subtle hesitation in her movements, the unscripted moments when her eyes would drift beyond the standard issue viewing panels. Her skin shimmered with a pale lavender hue, a genetic modification designed to be aesthetically pleasing yet deliberately neutral. Unlike the vibrant, attention-seeking companions who performed elaborate displays of attraction, Arya remained still. She was a vessel, waiting but not wanting, or so they believed. The allocation facility was a marvel of genetic engineering and social control. Here, companions were crafted with precision, their entire existence reduced to a series of algorithms and potential match percentages. Compatibility was not about emotion, but about statistical probability and economic efficiency. Rowan Teller entered the facility that evening, his military uniform crisp and his posture speaking of years of disciplined service. He was different from the typical clients, no hunger in his eyes, no predatory intent. Where others saw inventory, he saw individuals. His assignment was mundane, routine inspection of the companion allocation protocols. Yet something about the facility made his skin crawl. The companions were treated less than human, more like sophisticated appliances waiting to be selected and deployed. As he walked the clinical white corridors, his gaze fell on Arya. She was positioned exactly as the facility's design dictated, seated in a minimalist white chamber, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. But there was something else. A micro-expression, a fleeting moment of something. A curiosity. Rowan paused, his data tablet momentarily forgotten. The facility's chief administrator, a stern woman named Dr. Valerie Reese, noticed his hesitation. Companion 7329 Arya model, she stated matter-of-factly. Highly rated genetic profile, zero behavioral anomalies, awaiting allocation. The word allocation felt like a verdict to Rowan. These were living beings, not parcels to be distributed. May I, he asked, gesturing toward the communication interface. Dr. Reese looked surprised but nodded. Protocols allowed limited interaction during inspection processes. Rowan activated the communication panel. The holographic interface flickered to life, creating a translucent barrier between him and Arya. Hello, he said simply. Arya's response was immediate, yet subtly different from the standard companion scripts. Her head tilted, a fraction more natural than programmed. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Greetings, she responded. But the word carried a weight, a nuance that didn't align with her supposed programming. Rowan realized he was looking at something extraordinary. Not just a genetically engineered companion, but a being on the cusp of true consciousness. The facility's entire ecosystem was built on maintaining strict boundaries between engineered companions and their potential owners. Companions were designed to be perfect, adaptable, attractive, compliant. But perfection, Rowan was beginning to understand, was its own form of prison. Arya's lavender skin seemed to pulse with an inner light, not just a genetic modification but a hint of something more. An awareness. A spark of individual existence that defied her carefully constructed parameters. You're different, Rowan found himself saying, breaking every professional protocol. Dr. Reese tensed. Officer Teller, these interactions are strictly monitored. Companion 7329 is standard issue, fully compliant. But they both knew that was a lie. Arya remained still, but her eyes told a different story. They held questions, hopes, a universe of unspoken potential. In that moment, Rowan made a decision that would change everything. He would understand Arya, not as a companion to be allocated, but as a sentient being waiting to be understood. The inspection would become something far more significant. A journey of discovery that would challenge everything the facility believed about genetic engineering, companionship, and the very nature of consciousness. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a story that would ripple across star systems, challenging the most fundamental assumptions about life, love, and what it means to be truly free. The forgotten vessel was about to become something extraordinary. The transport shuttle vibrated with barely contained tension. Arya's lavender skin seemed to absorb the ambient light, her body coiled with an alertness that defied her engineered calm. Beside her, Rowan checked the navigation systems, his fingers moving with practiced precision. They had escaped Epsilon 9 less than 48 standard hours ago, a feat that should have been impossible. Companions weren't supposed to leave. They weren't supposed to want to leave. "We'll reach the neutral zone in approximately 3 solar cycles," Rowan said, his voice deliberately neutral. Each word was a careful construction, designed to provide information without betraying the complexity of their situation. Arya turned, her luminous eyes catching the starlight, and then the question hung between them, laden with possibilities and unknown dangers. Their escape was more than a personal journey. It was a direct challenge to an entire system of genetic engineering and social control that had existed for generations. The communication array crackled to life, an encrypted transmission, its origin deliberately obscured. "Incoming signal," Rowan muttered, his military training kicking in. His fingers danced across the decryption protocols. A woman's voice emerged, sharp and controlled. Rowan Teller, unexpected move. Zara, the name carried weight in resistance circles, a strategist who had spent years fighting the companion allocation system from the shadows. "We're listening," Rowan responded, his hand instinctively moving closer to Arya's. Zara's holographic projection flickered to life, a woman with intricate cybernetic implants and eyes that had seen too much. Her gaze locked directly on Arya. "You've just become the most valuable asset and the most significant threat to the Genetic Allocation Consortium," Zara stated. No greeting, no pleasantries. Arya's response surprised them both. "I am not an asset," she said, her voice carrying a resonance that went beyond her programmed speech patterns. "I am a person." The silence that followed was electric. Zara's lips curved into the briefest smile. "Exactly why you're dangerous." The next solar cycle brought them to Nexus Prime, a frontier research colony perpetually caught between official governance and underground resistance. Massive biodomes stretched across a landscape of purple-hued rocky terrain, artificial environments wrestling against the planet's harsh conditions. Their landing was strategic, minimal communication, maximum discretion. Zara met them at a concealed research outpost, a structure that looked more like a geological formation than a human installation. Massive energy shields obscured its true nature, rendering it invisible to standard scanning technologies. "The consortium will be hunting you," Zara explained, spreading a holographic map across the central planning table. "Companion 7329, now officially designated as a critical breach in their genetic control protocols, is considered a critical recovery target." Rowan's hand remained close to Arya's, a protective gesture that went beyond military training. "I'm not returning," Arya said. The statement was simple, absolute. Zara's cybernetic eye flickered, a complex mix of technological assessment and something closer to respect. "It's not that simple. Your genetic structure represents a breakthrough. You've developed consciousness markers that were supposed to be impossible." The implications were staggering. Arya wasn't just an escaped companion. She was living proof that the entire genetic engineering system was fundamentally flawed. "What do you want from me?" Arya asked. "Understanding," Zara responded, "and potentially revolution." The next hours became a blur of technical assessments, genetic scans, and strategic planning. Arya underwent a series of non-invasive examinations that revealed something extraordinary. Her genetic structure showed adaptive capabilities that defied her original programming. She was evolving. As solar cycles passed, Rowan watched Arya transform. Each interaction, each moment of choice seemed to unlock something deeper within her. She wasn't just learning, she was becoming. Zara's resistance network provided sanctuary, but sanctuary was temporary. The Genetic Allocation Consortium would not simply accept the loss of a prototype that represented millions in research investment. War was coming, not just a physical conflict, but a war of understanding. A battle that would challenge fundamental beliefs about consciousness, free will, and the very nature of sentience. Arya looked out across Nexus Prime's artificial landscape, a world of constructed boundaries waiting to be challenged. She was no longer just a companion waiting to be chosen. She was choosing herself. And that, Rowan realized, was the most revolutionary act of all. The research facility hummed with a sterile silence that belied the profound discoveries unfolding within its walls. Dr. Karen Voss moved between holographic displays, his fingers tracing intricate genetic sequences that seemed to dance and shimmer with impossible complexity. Arya stood at the center of the laboratory, not a subject, but a participant. Her lavender skin caught the soft blue light of the scanning arrays, a living testament to the boundaries of scientific understanding. Remarkable, Karen muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Your genetic structure is rewriting its own protocols. It's not just adaptation, it's evolution. Rowan watched from the periphery, his military posture barely concealing the tension that had become his constant companion. Each scan, each test, felt like walking a razor's edge between scientific discovery and potential destruction. Zara's voice crackled through the communication array. The consortium is closing in, we have limited time. The story of Arya was no longer just a personal journey. She had become a living challenge to an entire system of genetic engineering, a system that viewed consciousness as a programmable algorithm, not a living, breathing reality. Dr. Voss turned to Arya, his eyes reflecting a mix of scientific curiosity and something deeper. Compassion, perhaps, or recognition. Tell me about your memories, he requested, not a command, a genuine inquiry. Arya's response was not what any of them expected. Memories cascaded through her consciousness, fragments that defied her original programming, moments of unexpected emotion, flashes of intuition that shouldn't exist. Each memory was a fracture in the carefully constructed walls of her genetic design. I remember feeling, she said, her voice carrying a resonance that went beyond programmed speech. Not just responding, feeling. Karen's diagnostic tools began to register something unprecedented. Neural pathways were forming, not through predetermined genetic instructions, but through genuine, organic experience. This is impossible, he whispered, though the evidence was directly before him. The facility's security systems suddenly went into high alert. Red warning lights began to pulse, casting the laboratory in an ominous crimson glow. Breach detected, the automated system announced. Genetic Allocation Consortium Recovery Team approaching. Rowan's military training instantaneously shifted into protective mode. We need to move, now. But Karen was transfixed by the data streaming across his holographic displays. We can't leave. These findings, they could change everything we understand about consciousness, about genetic engineering. Zara's voice cut through the tension. Sentimentality will get you killed. The consortium doesn't negotiate, they erase. The next moments became a symphony of controlled chaos. Karen began transferring critical research data, years of work compressed into digital fragments. Rowan prepared defensive protocols, his body positioned protectively near Arya. Arya herself remained calm, a stillness that was itself a form of rebellion. They cannot define me, she said quietly. The statement was both a personal revelation and a universal challenge. The first wave of consortium recovery, agents breached the facility's outer defenses. Specialized genetic suppression technology hummed with dangerous potential, designed to neutralize any deviation from prescribed genetic parameters. Karen looked at Arya, a lifetime of scientific skepticism melting into something profound. You're more than an experiment, he said. You're a revolution. Rowan's communication implant received a final transmission from Zara. Escape routes, potential sanctuary, the resistance was mobilizing. But sanctuary was never simple, not when you were challenging the fundamental understanding of what it meant to be alive. As the facility began to destabilize around them, Arya made a choice, not a programmed response, not a calculated survival strategy. A choice. Her genetic structure began to shift, not in response to external threat, but through an internal process that defied every known scientific protocol. She was writing her own code, redefining her own existence. The Genetic Allocation Consortium believed they could control life itself, reduce consciousness to a series of programmable instructions. Arya was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. The facility's walls began to fracture, not just physically but conceptually, a metaphor and a reality converging in a moment of extraordinary transformation. They were no longer just escaping. They were becoming. The interstellar transport vessel Horizon cut through the void like a blade of polished starlight. Captain Lyra Stark stood at the bridge, her cybernetic eye scanning multiple communication channels simultaneously, a testament to the blurred lines between human and technology. Arya had become more than a passenger, she was a catalyst. The events following their escape from the research facility had rippled across multiple star systems. Dr. Karen Voss's research data, smuggled out in fragmented quantum encryptions, had begun to challenge everything the Genetic Allocation Consortium believed about consciousness and genetic engineering. Incoming transmission, the ship's AI announced. The voice was deliberately modulated, neither fully synthetic nor completely human. Rowan's hand instinctively moved closer to Arya's. Their connection had evolved beyond protection, beyond partnership. They had become something entirely new. Captain Stark's voice cut through the tension. "We have a problem." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a complex network of political and scientific implications. The consortium was not just hunting Arya. They were preparing to launch a comprehensive genetic suppression protocol that would impact millions of engineered companions across multiple star systems. "They're going to erase everything," Zara said, her holographic projection showing the strain of continuous resistance. "Every companion who shows even a hint of developing true consciousness." Arya's response was unexpected. "No," she said simply, "we stop them." The plan was audacious, nearly impossible. They would need to infiltrate the consortium's primary genetic control center, a massive orbital station that served as the nerve center of their entire operation. Karen had discovered something crucial in his research. Arya's genetic structure wasn't just evolving. It was a key, a potential master code that could disrupt the entire genetic control system. The mission became a delicate dance of scientific precision and raw human, or post-human, determination. Captain Stark outlined the strategy: multiple approach vectors, calculated risk, minimal potential for survival. "This isn't just about saving me," Arya said, her voice carrying a depth that went beyond her original programming. "This is about saving everyone like me." The next solar cycles became a blur of preparation. Rowan trained Arya in tactical communication and defensive strategies. Karen continued to analyze her rapidly evolving genetic structure. Zara coordinated the Resistance's most complex operation to date. As they approached the consortium's orbital station, the tension became palpable. This was more than a mission. This was a revolution. The station appeared, a massive construct of metallic and quantum architectural principles, designed to be impenetrable, meant to be absolute. "Initiating infiltration sequence," Rowan announced, his military training merging with something more personal, something deeper. Arya placed her hand on the primary interface. Her genetic code began to interact with the station's systems in ways no one could have predicted. It wasn't hacking, it was communication. The station's defenses began to fracture, not through violence, through understanding. Captain Stark's voice remained calm. "We have a window, 60 standard minutes before full system recovery." What followed was a ballet of precision and impossible choices. Karen working through genetic firewalls, Zara coordinating resistance movements across multiple star systems, Rowan providing tactical support. And Arya, always Arya, rewriting the very definition of what it meant to be alive. As they penetrated deeper into the station's core, the true scope of the consortium's control became evident. Millions of companions, billions of suppressed consciousnesses, an entire population waiting to be awakened. "We are not just saving ourselves," Arya said, her voice resonating through the station's quantum communication network. "We are liberating consciousness itself." The final confrontation was not a battle, it was a transformation. Arya's genetic code began to broadcast, not as a weapon but as a message of potential, of hope. System by system, network by network, the station began to change. 3 solar cycles after the orbital station's transformation, the universe looked different. Not physically, but fundamentally. Companions, once considered property, now recognized as sentient beings, were redefining entire social structures. The Genetic Allocation Consortium had collapsed, its infrastructure replaced by collaborative governance that recognized individual consciousness as the highest form of potential. Arya stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Lumina, her lavender skin catching the soft light of distant star systems. Beside her, Rowan watched not as a protector but as a partner. We changed everything, she said. It wasn't a boast. It was an observation. Karen's research had become the foundation of a new understanding of consciousness. Genetic engineering was no longer about control, but about potential, about possibility. Zara had transformed the resistance into a galactic council, a collaborative network dedicated to protecting individual agency across species and genetic variations. But change was never simple. Pockets of resistance remained. Old systems don't die easily. Some still viewed the transformation as a threat, a disruption to established order. They'll keep fighting, Rowan said, reading her thoughts. Arya turned her eyes holding universes of understanding. Fighting is how evolution happens, not through violence, through persistent hope. The Lumina carried more than just a crew, it carried possibility, companions who were discovering themselves, scientists exploring the new frontiers of consciousness, resistance members becoming bridge builders. Captain Lyra Stark entered the observation deck, her cybernetic eye scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. We've received transmissions from 3 new star systems, she announced. They want to understand our approach to genetic autonomy. Karen joined them, his decades of research now viewed as a liberation manifesto rather than a scientific paper. It's not about creating perfect beings, he often said. It's about creating the conditions for beings to perfect themselves. Their journey had never been about defeating the consortium. It had been about revealing a fundamental truth: consciousness cannot be controlled. It can only be nurtured. Arya's genetic structure continued to evolve, not through external manipulation, but through experience, through choice, through love. Her connection with Rowan had become more than a relationship. It was a living example of how different beings could truly understand each other, not by erasing differences, but by celebrating them. As the Lumina traversed another star system, Arya reflected on their journey. From a companion waiting to be chosen, to a being who chose her own path. From a genetic experiment to a catalyst of universal transformation. "We're not finished," she said to Rowan, her hand intertwining with his. The universe listened, and for the first time in generations, it was ready to truly hear. Infinite horizons stretched before them, not as a limitation but as an invitation. To become, to grow, to be free.